What if I told you that two tomato plants growing side by side, receiving the exact same sunlight, water, and fertilizer, can produce completely different harvests simply because of what's growing around them? One plant stays healthy, attracts pollinators, and produces baskets of flavorful tomatoes. The other struggles with pests, poor airflow, and lower yields. The difference often isn't luck, it's smart garden planning. One of the biggest mistakes new gardeners make is assuming companion planting is some kind of gardening magic. They hear that planting one flower beside tomatoes will chase away every insect, or that one herb will somehow double the harvest overnight. That's simply not how gardens work. The truth is much more interesting. Companion planting is not based on myths or folklore. At its best, it's built on biology, ecology, biodiversity, and practical garden management. Good companion planting encourages beneficial insects, makes efficient use of space, improves soil coverage, supports integrated pest management, and creates a healthier growing environment for tomatoes. It works together with proper watering, healthy soil, good spacing, and sunlight, not instead of them. Today, we're going to explore exactly which plants make the best neighbors for tomatoes, which combinations are backed by years of gardening experience and horticultural knowledge, which popular claims deserve a healthy dose of skepticism, and which plants you should generally keep far away. By the end of this video, you'll know how to design a tomato bed that works with nature instead of fighting against it. Before choosing companions, it's important to understand the tomato itself. Tomatoes are vigorous plants with surprisingly extensive root systems. Although many gardeners think of them as having one deep taproot, healthy tomato plants actually develop large networks of lateral roots that spread through the surrounding soil. These roots compete for water and nutrients, while also interacting with soil microbes that help release nutrients for plant growth. Above ground, tomatoes need plenty of sunlight, at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sun every day. They also need excellent airflow. Crowded plants remain damp longer after rain or watering, increasing the risk of fungal diseases. That means the best companions are not simply plants that like tomatoes. They're plants that either improve biodiversity, attract beneficial insects, occupy unused space efficiently, or reduce certain pest pressures without competing excessively for light, water, or nutrients. Here's an interesting fact. A diverse vegetable garden often supports more beneficial insects than a garden planted with a single crop. Diversity provides pollen, nectar, shelter, and alternative food sources throughout the growing season, helping natural predators stay in your garden instead of disappearing when pest numbers temporarily drop. That's one of the biggest reasons companion planting can work. Let's start with one of the most famous tomato companions, basil. Gardeners have paired basil with tomatoes for generations. While you'll often hear claims that basil dramatically improves tomato flavor, scientific evidence for that specific claim is very limited. However, basil still earns its place beside tomatoes for several practical reasons. It stays relatively compact, tolerates similar growing conditions, attracts pollinators once flowering begins, provides nectar for beneficial insects, and makes excellent use of space beneath taller tomato plants. Many gardeners also report fewer insect problems around basil, although results vary, depending on local pest populations and garden conditions. Perhaps most importantly, basil doesn't compete aggressively with tomatoes when spaced properly. Another practical benefit is harvesting convenience. If you enjoy fresh tomatoes and basil together in the kitchen, planting them nearby simply makes harvesting easier. Now let's talk about marigolds. Marigolds are probably the most misunderstood companion plant in gardening. Many articles claim marigolds repel every possible garden pest. That's an exaggeration. Some marigold species, particularly French marigolds, have been studied for their ability to suppress certain species of root knot nematodes when grown as part of crop rotations or cover plantings. They also provide nectar that attracts beneficial insects. However, planting one marigold beside one tomato won't create an invisible shield against every insect. Their greatest value comes from increasing biodiversity, supporting pollinators, attracting beneficial insects, and adding flowers that keep helpful predators visiting your vegetable garden. Speaking of flowers, nasturtiums deserve special attention. These colorful plants often attract aphids, making them what gardeners sometimes call a trap crop. Instead of aphids concentrating entirely on your tomatoes, many settle on the nasturtiums. This doesn't eliminate pests completely, but it can help distribute pest pressure while also supporting populations of ladybugs and lacewings that feed on aphids. Nasturtium flowers also attract bees and hoverflies, increasing beneficial insect activity throughout the garden. Here's another useful gardening insight. Hoverfly adults feed mainly on nectar and pollen, but their larvae are voracious predators of aphids. A single hoverfly larva may consume dozens of aphids before reaching adulthood. That's why flowering companion plants matter. They're not feeding the pests, they're feeding the predators that help keep pest populations balanced. Calendula works in a similar way. Its bright flowers bloom over a long season, providing nectar for beneficial insects including hoverflies, parasitic wasps, and pollinators. Continuous flowering means these insects have reliable food even when vegetables aren't blooming heavily. Now let's move underground. Members of the onion family, including onions, garlic, and chives, are excellent tomato companions. These crops occupy relatively little space, have different root structures, and fit well between tomato rows. Although many gardeners believe their scent strongly repels pests, scientific support for broad insect-repelling effects is mixed. Nevertheless, these crops contribute to crop diversity, make efficient use of available space, and allow gardeners to harvest additional food from the same bed. Chives offer an extra advantage. When allowed to flower, their attractive purple blossoms become magnets for bees and other beneficial insects early in the growing season. Let's look at carrots. At first glance, carrots and tomatoes seem like an unusual combination. Carrots grow deep while tomatoes spread more widely near the surface. If planted with proper spacing, carrots can mature before tomato roots become extremely competitive. This allows gardeners to harvest two crops from the same area without major interference. Lettuce is another excellent space-saving companion. Early in the season, before tomatoes grow large, lettuce thrives in the open sunlight. Later, as tomato plants become taller, they provide partial afternoon shade that can help reduce lettuce bolting during warmer weather. Spinach works similarly in many climates. Instead of leaving bare soil between tomato plants, you harvest leafy greens while young tomatoes establish themselves. Bare soil dries faster, grows more weeds, and loses moisture more quickly. Living ground cover from compatible crops helps use that space productively. Parsley deserves consideration as well. It tolerates similar conditions, stays relatively compact, attracts beneficial insects when flowering, and provides another edible crop beneath taller tomato plants. Now let's discuss dill. Dill offers one of the most interesting examples of companion planting depending on plant age. Young dill generally coexists well with tomatoes and attracts beneficial insects as it matures. However, large mature dill plants can become surprisingly competitive and may interfere with nearby crops if grown too close. Many experienced gardeners simply harvest dill regularly before it becomes oversized. Timing matters just as much as plant selection. Another outstanding companion is borage. Borage produces beautiful blue flowers that attract bees throughout the growing season. Tomatoes are primarily self-pollinating, but bee activity still improves flower vibration, helping transfer pollen within blossoms and often improving pollination under many growing conditions. Borage also contributes to biodiversity by providing abundant nectar for pollinators and beneficial insects. Here's an interesting ecosystem fact. Many beneficial insects need nectar as adults but hunt pests only during their larval stages. By planting nectar-rich flowers throughout your vegetable garden, You're supporting multiple stages of their life cycle. Beans can also fit into tomato gardens. Bush beans generally work better than vigorous climbing beans because they don't compete heavily for vertical space or shade tomato plants. As legumes, beans host bacteria that fix atmospheric nitrogen. However, it's important to understand one common misconception. The nitrogen fixed by bean roots is mostly used by the bean plant itself during the growing season. Tomatoes usually don't receive large amounts of immediately available nitrogen from neighboring bean plants while both are actively growing. The long-term soil benefits become more noticeable after plant residues decompose. This is a great example of separating gardening myths from reality. Companion planting isn't magic chemistry between neighboring roots. It's ecology. Now let's talk about flowers that deserve a place near tomatoes because of the insects they attract. Ladybugs are among the most famous beneficial insects. Both adults and larvae consume aphids, helping reduce infestations naturally. Lacewings are equally valuable. Their larvae feed on aphids, whiteflies, mites, thrips, and other soft-bodied insects that commonly attack vegetables. Hoverflies, as we mentioned earlier, provide double benefits through pollination and aphid control. Parasitic wasps sound intimidating, but most are tiny, harmless to people, and incredibly helpful in gardens. They lay eggs inside or on pest insects, naturally reducing pest populations. Flowers such as calendula, dill flowers, fennel flowers grown elsewhere in the garden, sweet alyssum, yarrow, cosmos, and other nectar-rich blooms help sustain these beneficial insects. One practical tip many experienced gardeners use is staggering flower bloom times. Instead of planting only one flowering species, combine several that bloom throughout the season. Continuous flowers mean continuous food for beneficial insects. Now let's address some popular companion planting claims that deserve skepticism. You'll often hear statements like plant this herb and insects will completely disappear. Real gardens don't work that way. Insect populations depend on weather, surrounding vegetation, local ecology, crop diversity, and many other factors. Companion planting may reduce certain pest pressures or improve predator activity, but it rarely eliminates problems entirely. Another common claim is that neighboring plants chemically communicate in ways that dramatically increase tomato yields. While plants do release chemical compounds and interact with soil organisms, evidence supporting dramatic yield increases from specific companion combinations remains limited. Most measurable benefits come from better biodiversity, habitat creation, efficient space use, weed suppression, and integrated pest management. Speaking of pest management, companion planting works best as one tool among many. Integrated pest management, or IPM, is an approach that combines prevention, monitoring, biological controls, cultural practices, and targeted interventions only when necessary. Healthy soil, proper watering, disease-resistant tomato varieties, crop rotation, mulching, good sanitation, encouraging beneficial insects. These practices work together. Companion planting fits naturally into this larger strategy rather than replacing it. Now let's discuss plants that generally shouldn't grow beside tomatoes. Potatoes belong to the same botanical family as tomatoes. Because they share many diseases, including late blight, growing them close together can increase disease management challenges. Crop rotation becomes much harder when closely related crops occupy the same area year after year. Eggplants and peppers are also members of the same family. Although they can physically grow together, grouping all closely related crops in one location may concentrate shared pests and diseases. Many gardeners still grow them together successfully, especially in smaller gardens, but careful monitoring becomes more important. Corn presents another challenge. Tomatoes and corn can share certain caterpillar pests, increasing the likelihood of infestations. Moving between crops. Large corn plants also create shade that tomatoes generally don't appreciate. Fennel deserves special mention. Unlike dill, fennel has a reputation for reducing growth of several neighboring vegetables and is often recommended as a crop to grow separately. Black walnut trees create perhaps the clearest example of plant incompatibility. Their roots produce juglone, a compound that many plants, including tomatoes, are sensitive to. Tomatoes growing near black walnut trees often perform poorly regardless of companion planting. Here's another mistake gardeners make. They plant companions too closely. Even beneficial neighbors become competitors when crowded. Tomatoes need airflow. Leaves should dry quickly after rain or watering. Proper spacing reduces fungal disease far more effectively than any companion flower. Another common error is allowing companion plants to become overgrown. A massive patch of herbs or flowers can eventually compete with tomatoes for sunlight, water, and nutrients. Regular harvesting keeps many companions productive without allowing them to dominate. Container gardening introduces different considerations. In containers, root competition becomes much more significant because soil volume is limited. Compact companions like basil, chives, or small lettuce varieties often work well, while larger companions may overcrowd the container. Raised beds offer excellent opportunities for companion planting because gardeners can carefully control spacing, irrigation, and soil quality. Interplanting lettuce, carrots, herbs, flowers, and tomatoes becomes much easier when every inch of bed space is accessible. Greenhouses require even greater attention to airflow. Although companion flowers can still attract beneficial insects if greenhouse access allows, humidity management becomes especially important for preventing tomato diseases. Commercial vegetable growers also use companion planting principles, although often on a larger ecological scale. Instead of planting flowers randomly, many establish flowering borders around fields. These borders provide habitat for pollinators and beneficial insects while allowing large-scale tomato production to remain efficient. Home gardeners can borrow this idea. Rather than squeezing every companion directly beside tomatoes, consider creating flower strips nearby. This approach often supports beneficial insects while maintaining excellent airflow around your vegetables. Here's a fascinating fact. A healthy garden functions much like a miniature ecosystem. Every flowering plant feeds pollinators. Every beneficial insect feeds on something. Every layer of vegetation provides shelter. The goal isn't eliminating every insect. The goal is maintaining balance. Healthy ecosystems rarely stay completely pest-free, but they often prevent pests from reaching destructive levels. As we wrap up, remember this simple principle. Companion planting succeeds when it improves the entire garden rather than focusing on one magical plant combination. Plant basil for efficient use of space and pollinator support. Use marigolds, calendula, borage, nasturtiums, and other flowers to encourage beneficial insects. Add onions, garlic, and chives for crop diversity. Interplant lettuce, spinach, carrots, and parsley to make better use of available growing space. Use dill carefully while it's young. Include bush beans where appropriate, understanding their realistic benefits. Most importantly, give tomatoes exactly what they need first: rich soil, consistent watering, full sunlight, strong support, good airflow, and proper spacing. Those factors will always have a greater influence on your harvest than companion planting alone. When you combine excellent tomato care with thoughtful companion planting, you create a healthier, more diverse garden that supports pollinators, encourages beneficial insects, reduces wasted space, and makes the entire vegetable patch more productive. And that's the real secret behind the best tomato harvests: not one miracle companion plant, but an entire garden working together as a balanced, living ecosystem.